The sun had barely risen over the quiet suburban streets when Keisha Johnson rolled herself through the front doors of Willowbrook High School. The hallways buzzed with the usual morning chaos, backpacks thumping on linoleum floors, laughter mingling with the clatter of lockers, and the faint murmur of chatter as students gathered. For most, it was just the start of another day, but for Keisha, each step, or rather each glide of her wheelchair, was a navigation through a world that often refused to see her beyond her disability. Keisha was 16, with smooth, dark skin that caught the warm morning light through the windows, and eyes that held a depth of quiet strength, even if she rarely let it show. Her black hair was pulled neatly back, practical for school, but also a nod to her discipline and self-care. But her left leg, weakened since birth, made walking impossible, and the wheelchair she used was more than just a mode of transport. It was a shield, and at times, a target. Today, like many days before, she felt the weight of invisible eyes tracking her path. The hallway stallions, the loud, self-assured crowd that ruled the social order, parted with subtle smirks and whispered glances. At the center of this storm was Madison, a tall, athletic cheerleader whose sharp blue eyes often sparked icy sparks of cruelty. Madison's laugh, tinkling and sharp-edged, had become synonymous with Keisha's daily torment. It began with a cold stare from across the hallway as Keisha wheeled past, followed by a snide comment from Madison's group. "Watch out, it's the human bumper car," one sneered, feigning to dodge her. A chorus of quiet chuckles rippled through their clique. Keisha did not react. She had learned long ago that showing anger only fueled the fire. But inside, a familiar tightening in her chest grew, a mixture of frustration and hurt curling like vines around her ribs. The cafeteria was no better. As she slipped into her usual corner table, the whispers intensified. "Why even try? She's just weak," another voice added, dripping with false pity. "Must be so hard to be stuck like that." Some kids glanced away quickly. Others lingered, spitting venom cloaked in fake sympathy. It was a scene she knew well, familiar, but no less painful. But there was one place where none of that mattered. A secret world where Keisha became someone else entirely. Late at night, hours after the school had emptied, she would maneuver herself to the nearby dojo. Here, under the watchful eye of Master Lee, a quiet, disciplined man who believed in her potential, Keisha honed her skills in martial arts. Here she was not the girl in the wheelchair, but a force to be reckoned with. A prodigy who had mastered techniques adapted perfectly to her strengths and unique movement. Yet, even with these victories in private, the pressure to remain invisible at school was suffocating. She feared revealing her true self. The silence she maintained was her armor. If anyone discovered her talents, it could shatter the fragile balance she navigated every day. As the morning bell rang, signaling the start of another grueling day, Keisha took a deep breath, willing herself to face the oncoming storm. Though unseen to most, her hands gripped the wheelchair rims with determination, her mind quietly rehearsing the moves she practiced silently at the dojo. Today felt different, not in the chill of the mockery, but in the unspoken question lingering in the air. How long would she bear the weight of their cruelty before something inside her snapped? Could the quiet girl everyone underestimated possibly be stronger than they imagined? Was there an unseen force ready to rise beneath the surface? As she prepared to enter her next class, Keisha's heart hammered with a mix of apprehension and unvoiced hope. Her story was about to change. But how? Have you ever felt trapped by others' assumptions, hiding your true self just to survive? What would it take for you to step out of the shadows? The afternoon sun filtered weakly through the classroom blinds, casting long stripes of light over the rows of desks. Keisha sat quietly at the back, her wheelchair positioned slightly apart, as usual. The teacher's words droned on about some historical event, but Keisha's mind was elsewhere, tangled in the day's earlier scene. The same faces, the same snide remarks, the same dismissive glances played on an unending loop inside her head. She sometimes wondered if anyone truly saw her, not just as the girl with the wheelchair, but as Keisha Johnson, complicated, talented, and fiercely determined. She clenched her fists in her lap, the plastic wheel rims slick beneath her fingers. It wasn't just the taunts. They were schoolyard rituals of cruelty, but the crushing weight of invisibility that stung the most. Teachers often forgot to speak directly to her. Classmates hurried past as if she was a ghost. She was there, but maybe it was easier for them if she wasn't. During lunch, she retreated to her usual corner once again, peeling a small sandwich with practiced motions. Nearby, a group of students laughed boisterously, their eyes flickering toward her with amusement or disdain. Madison's voice floated through the cafeteria air like hot smoke, calling out in a tone just meant loud enough for some to hear, "Hey, Keisha, you even know what it's like to fight back?" The bait was there, sharp and mocking. Keisha remained silent, staring down at her lunch. Fight back? How? She'd trained for years in the dojo, her fists cutting through the air as surely as any able-bodied fighters. But here, in this sea of judgments and sneers, it wasn't just about skill. It was about perception, prejudice, and the unbearable loneliness of being other. Doubts crept in like icy fingers. Did any of her efforts matter if no one ever got to see the real her? The bell rang, dragging her back to classes, back to an uneasy routine. She wheeled toward the library, a sanctuary filled with dusty books and soft corners, places where judgments were quiet. Pulling a worn leather-bound journal from her backpack, Keisha flipped to a blank page and began to write. Her pen flowed over the paper, documenting not just homework assignments, but the storm inside her, a mixture of pain, hope, and frustration. It was there, in the quiet privacy of words, that she allowed herself to feel truly seen. Because, out loud, in the noisy halls of Willowbrook High, her voice was just another whisper swallowed by a crowd. The truth was, Keisha wasn't just dealing with bullies, she was grappling with the silent weight of doubt that sometimes told her she wasn't enough. Sometimes the hardest fight wasn't the one on the mat, but the one within. A battle against fear and shame that wanted to cage her spirit. Yet beneath the surface, an ember flickered. Every session at the dojo, every precise kick or graceful maneuver she practiced, fanned that ember into a quiet blaze. In the hours away from school, with Master Lee's guidance, she transformed, her body and mind harmonizing in a dance of strength and resilience. The techniques she mastered were uniquely hers, designed for the way her left leg moved, for the power her arms could deliver. She wasn't simply adapting, she was innovating. It was like magic, a secret world where limitation became advantage, weakness turned weapon. But even in those moments, Keisha wondered, what if her secret got out? Would she be celebrated, or would it just invite more ridicule? Her spirit craved recognition, but fear held tight like shackles. Days passed in this painful rhythm. The bullying continued, subtle and sharp. Notes left in her locker, whispered jokes caught from the corners of classrooms, the invisible cord of exclusion wrapping tighter. Madison prowled the halls like a queen over her kingdom, proud and merciless. She basked in the power her cruelty caroused, oblivious to the storm quietly building in the person she tormented. The tension inside Keisha grew like a volcano, tightening its grip beneath the earth. Something was shifting, though she wasn't sure what exactly. Would she remain the silent target, or find the courage to shatter the image they clung to, a helpless girl in a wheelchair? The question haunted her waking hours. One afternoon, after a particularly humiliating encounter where Madison's pack shoved her wheelchair backward as she tried to enter a classroom, something inside Keisha broke. A flicker of defiance sparked, distant but growing brighter. They thought she was invisible, weak, broken. What they didn't know was that every sneer, every shove, every laugh only fueled her secret fire. As she wheeled herself outside after that day, the sharp chill of autumn air grabbed her cheeks, awakening her senses. She paused, letting the cold, ground truth settle. The moment to hide was fading. Keisha's mind raced, her limbs eager to move with the grace and strength she alone possessed. The next encounter would not be the same. Have you ever felt trapped by others' cruelty, yet found a hidden strength waiting to emerge? What would it take for you to stand and be seen? The days following that cold afternoon passed in a blur of anticipation and apprehension for Keisha. The hallways seemed thicker with tension, as if the very walls whispered secrets she hadn't yet uncovered. Each classroom door felt like a threshold between the invisible chains of her torment and a potential escape into a newfound power. Yet uncertainty clung to her like a second skin. Could she truly defy the image everyone held of her? Could she reveal the fierce warrior hidden beneath the quiet exterior without shattering the fragile peace she'd maintained? That Monday morning, the air was heavy with promise and dread. The school buzzed louder than usual as students gathered in the auditorium for an assembly, the kind where the principal's announcements and pep rallies usually jumbled into a background hum. Today, however, it felt charged with something different, a prelude to the cruel spectacle Madison had been plotting. Keisha was ushered into the crowd, seating herself near the back, her heart thudding in her chest as the lights dimmed and the assembly began. Madison wasn't subtle. Her coalition of bullies were poised like predators, eyes gleaming with malicious anticipation. When the mic finally reached her, she stood confidently, flashing a flawless smile to mask the venom beneath. "Let's have some fun," she purred, voice dripping with mock sweetness. Then came the moment Keisha dreaded, Madison's plan to publicly humiliate her in front of the entire student body. With a sharp jab masked as casual banter, Madison launched her attack. She made a series of cruel remarks about Keisha's wheelchair, her supposed limitations, and spun a twisted tale of pity that drew laughter and gasps from the crowd. Then, in a move that shocked the entire auditorium, Madison orchestrated a staged prank, a rigged scene where Keisha's chair was tied to a box that spilled confetti and a mess of glitter when moved, turning what was a simple passage into a spectacle of embarrassment. For a heartbeat, time froze. Keisha sat motionless, blindsided. Heat flushed her cheeks as laughter erupted around her, some students throwing sideways glances filled with a tangle of amusement and guilt. Her chest tightened with shame and rage, a storm brewing behind clenched teeth and trembling hands. Yet, the moment marked a turning point. The humiliation, raw and sharp as it was, ignited an unexpected fire within her. Keisha's breathing steadied, her mind racing back to the dojo, where countless hours of training had sculpted not only her body, but her spirit. She recalled the calm center she found there, the endless repetition of movements that turned vulnerability into strength. As the assembly disbanded, Madison leaned into her usual taunt, smirking, "What's the matter, Keisha? Cat got your tongue?" But this time, the silence didn't hold her down. Keisha slowly wheeled herself out of the auditorium, her gaze steady and unflinching. When Madison followed, mocking footsteps echoing in the empty corridor, Keisha felt the weight of every sneer and whispered insult collect into something she could finally seize. When they reached the gym, spacious, echoing with the faint scent of polished wood and the sharp tang of sweat, Madison's grin faltered, sensing a shift she hadn't anticipated. The group circled, ready for another round of torment, but Keisha surprised them all. With a strength born from years of unseen practice, she locked her wheelchair's brakes, steadied her breath, and then, without warning, lifted herself skillfully out of the chair. Gasps echoed softly among the circle. Their eyes widened as Keisha stood tall on her own 2 feet, moving with a fluidity that contradicted every assumption they had made. Her left leg braced firmly, while swift, precise movements wielded were honed from hours of solitary training. She no longer resembled the vulnerable girl they thought they could mock. She was a force, controlled and formidable. Madison lunged forward, her arrogance clouding her caution. Keisha met her strike with an elegant block, followed by a practiced twisting maneuver that spun Madison off balance. In moments, the cheerleader and her cronies found themselves grounded, not by brute force, but by Keisha's surprising agility and strategy. The gymnasium fell into stunned silence. Whispers sparsed through the gathered students like a rising tide. Who was this girl? How had they so drastically underestimated her? For Keisha, the moment was raw and electric, her secret out, her truth revealed. Yet, amidst the shock and the ripple of newfound respect, there was a slender thread of fear. What now? How would the school react? Would this victory ripple beyond the gym's polished floors or dissolve beneath the weight of prejudice? Madison's fury was palpable, but her smirk cracked, revealing a flicker of uncertainty and something close to fear. In that suspended moment, the tides of power had shifted. Keisha, once hidden and humiliated, now commanded the space with a quiet but undeniable strength. Can a single act of courage shatter years of invisibility? How do we redefine ourselves in the eyes of those who refuse to see us before? How would you stand if your hidden strength was suddenly revealed? The silence in the gym was heavy, thick like the calm before a storm poised to unleash itself. Keisha stood steady, her breath even despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. Madison, who was used to controlling every social battlefield she strolled into, blinked, her confidence unraveling before her eyes. Her group stood frozen, mouths parted, unsure whether to flee or challenge this new reality. The power dynamics that had ruled Willowbrook High for so long were cracking, and in their midst stood Keisha, transformed from invisible target into undeniable force. The tension was broken when a teacher's voice, hesitant but firm, cut through the murmur. Enough. Mr. Collins, a teacher who rarely intervened in student drama, stepped forward, his gaze flickering between the stunned bullies and the girl standing tall. I want everyone to take a moment and think about what just happened and what's coming next. Madison's eyes narrowed. Defiant, she spat, this changes nothing. She's just lucky. But luck, Keisha knew, had nothing to do with it. Each precise move had been sculpted by years of sweat, doubt, and relentless practice in the shadows. Word spread fast. By the next morning, whispers of the confrontation had transformed into conversations. Students who once averted their eyes began to glance at Keisha with a newfound respect. Teachers who had overlooked her started to acknowledge her presence with a smile instead of a dismissal. The gym incident was more than a moment of resistance. It was a reckoning that forced the school to confront its prejudices. Madison's dominance crumbled in subtle ways. Invitations to exclusive events dwindled, her sharp remarks met with silence. The arrogant cheerleader realized that power built on others' weaknesses was fragile. For the first time, she was exposed to the strength of someone she had underestimated. Keisha's life shifted in quiet but profound ways. Where there had once been isolation, now space opened for connection. Classmates approached her, not to mock, but to listen and learn. Teachers encouraged her to share her story, inspiring others with her perseverance. Even her parents, who had always been proud but protective, saw the blossoming of confidence that had been sparked by this bravery. Yet Keisha remained humble, understanding that her journey was not only about personal triumph, but about challenging deep-rooted biases. She continued training, perfecting techniques, and mentoring others with disabilities who saw in her a symbol of possibility. Her identity was no longer defined by the chair or by the judgment of others, but by the courage to stand, both literally and metaphorically. In the hallways, the atmosphere changed palpably. Where once there was mockery, now there was consideration. Where there was exclusion, now there was respect. The school community, shaken from its complacency, began to embrace a broader understanding of strength and ability. One day, as Keisha wheeled through the cafeteria, this time joined by new friends, she caught Madison's gaze. The tension was gone, replaced by something softer, a reluctant acknowledgement that the game had changed. Keisha nodded slightly, a gesture of quiet grace rather than triumph. Looking back on the month since that day in the gym, Keisha felt an overwhelming swell of gratitude, not just for her own growth, but for the awakening she had sparked in others. Her story became a beacon, lighting the way for those who had ever felt invisible, dismissed, or underestimated. And so, the girl who had once been humiliated and unseen stood firmly at the center of her world, no longer defined by limits, but by limitless strength. Have you ever witnessed someone's courage change the world around them? What hidden strengths lie waiting within you, ready to emerge when the moment calls? If this story touched your heart, please subscribe for more stories like this. See you in the next video.